Welcome, Agent. So are skills too strong, or is heroic difficulty too easy? Now, the reason I wanted to cover this today was that I've seen a lot of people talking about heroic content being too easy, especially in a group when everyone is using Seeker Mines, explosive builds, which essentially requires you to sit behind cover, drop Seeker Mines and move on, essentially. Now, today I wanted to discuss this topic. Are some skills a little bit overtuned when built properly, or is heroic difficulty too easy, and is there a way to kind of fix that? Now, if you enjoyed this one, please hit the like button below, subscribe for dedicated Division 2 content, and let's get into this. Alright, so first and foremost, let's just nip this in the bud right off the bat. So, people don't start rushing to the comments saying, I want nerfs, okay? Because that's not what I want. I actually think explosive skills like Seeker Mines, they're actually in a pretty good place for PvE. PvP, that's maybe a topic for another time. But for PvE, yeah, I think they're pretty good. And I absolutely don't want a nerf, alright? So let me just nip that in the bud, because I put out this question on my community chat, and a lot of people responded saying, oh, Epic, you want nerfs, you're always wanting nerfs and all that sort of stuff. That's obviously not what I want here. The question is, are skills overtuned, or is heroic too easy? And the conclusion I came to as we go through this is that heroic is probably too easy for some people. Okay, so with that out of the way, as you guys know, I'm no specialist PvE player, or PvP for that matter, and I rarely play heroic difficulty, and by rarely, I think I've probably played heroic maybe a couple of times since the Division 2 came out. So in order to make this video, I've actually played it a lot more recently, using both a weapon-based PvE build, which was a rifle build, which you're going to see on screen possibly, or I'm not sure if it's going to be the rifle build or the Seeker Mine build that I'm running on screen. It's going to be probably a mixture of both. And that way I can have some sort of playable experience and form an opinion in order to make this video. And I hope you guys can respect that, because I've been doing that a lot more in order just so that I can have an opinion on this stuff. Now, on screen, as I said, you're going to see my attempt at actually using these two builds. And just please don't roast me in the comments, because I appreciate I'm not the greatest PvE player at all. Now, I appreciate that my opinion here is subjective, and I do have very little experience in heroic difficulty content compared to some of you absolute savages out there. Now, from what I've been able to tell from my limited time, is that heroic difficulty and Seeker Mine explosive builds in PvE are fine, right? I think they're absolutely fine. Now, with that said, I'm not naive to the fact that there are solo players and groups who can absolutely steamroll this content. They create an absolute monster build, they get in there, they run through it in 5 minutes and they move on, right? Now, I've seen horror runs with groups where everyone kind of puts on these insane explosive skill builds and they never have to use their weapon, and that's fine. That's part of the experience, is that you create that power fantasy, which this game at one point lacked a lot of, and since the changes to skills, I think it's come back and we've got that power fantasy back, and that's great. Okay, that's absolutely fine. But there are people out there who want something more difficult. Okay, some people just don't want to sit in cover, drop Seekers, and then everything gets destroyed. They want to actually have a challenge. Okay, and heroic, for some people, do not do that. For the casual audience like myself, I think so. So, with that in mind, I think there needs to be another level above heroic difficulty. Now, for me, heroic is very hard. I really struggle. It takes me a long time to get through. I really have to be patient. In a group, it's just as hard. Whether I'm running a pretty optimized rifle build, whether I'm running a Seeker Mine build, just because I've got a good build doesn't mean I can actually get through the content. Okay, and I've realized that about myself. This game is very much about builds. Okay, but unless you know what you're doing and how you know how to synergize stuff, and certainly with like a rifle build, unless your shot is on key, then you're going to find it very difficult. And I realise that about myself. I realise I'm just not the best at this. But for some people, this stuff is, it's a cakewalk. People are just running through this stuff, okay? And it's hard for me, but it's not challenging for others. And I think having another level like Legendary, for example, a next level up, a tier up, I think that would appease, the real hardcore PvE players. And this would also not affect the casual players like myself, who could still go into heroic and have a very awful time, essentially, who could really, really struggle. And if for whatever reason I really did hit heroic on the head and I really started grinding out, well, maybe you might see me in Legendary one day. I doubt it very much, okay? But it would add that tier above heroic for people who are looking for that experience. Now, personally, I don't see any drawbacks to the inclusion of another level above heroic. I really don't. Except for possibly the time it would take to develop, which could, take away from some of that's maybe more important. But aside from that, I see no drawbacks, because you would still keep that power fantasy. If you are one of those players that love that power fantasy, well, just don't play legendary, just play heroic. Obviously, one of the main issues with it is, what would you tie? What rewards would you tie to legendary? Well, that's a question for the developers, but it would have to be worth it. Of course, in the game right now, there probably isn't anything they could tie to it that would make it worth it, because all they could really do is drop more 500 gear score items, more crap, essentially more stuff for you to get rid of. Okay, so until they make some other adjustments to the actual core experience of the game and the leveling and the gear score, which is, again, gear score is a subject I'm going to cover in a future video for this type of series, this Let's Talk series almost. Then until they fix that, then yeah, it doesn't really make sense for Legend to be included, because the rewards wouldn't be worth it. But if the rewards were worth it, then there's no drawbacks. I simply do not see any drawbacks to this. Now, what do you guys think of this? I want you guys to leave it down in the comments below. Do you think skills are in a good place like me, or do you think they need adjust? And I'm gonna probably guess that 99% of people think that skills are in a very good place. And I have to agree. I think the job they did with skills was a very good one, a one that we very much needed, and it feels good now for me to go into even PvP, which, again, for another topic, but to go into PvP with a Seeker Mine build and actually do pretty well. Go into PvE content with a Seeker Mine build, or whatever build I want that involves skills, and do very, very well. I like that. Do you guys think that heroic is fine, by the way? Do you think heroic is good, or would you like another tier above it? Would that be a welcome addition? I know some people who actually, this kind of topic came up because I saw people talking about this on Twitter. I know some of those people would be very happy with this, because some of those people are savages and they got a very good group composition, they got group synergy, and they breeze through the raid, they breeze through heroic content, and for them there's no challenge. Okay, they got that power fantasy, and that's fine. Power fantasy is great, but if you look at someone like Destiny, where you very much get that power fantasy, when you're hitting red bar enemies, they're going down within seconds. But then you've got the raid, which, yeah, you feel strong, but you also feel weak at the same time, and you also have like other stuff which is very hard to do. You've still got that power fantasy because you've got all the ads leading up to the main event, and that's what I would like to see for some sort of legendary difficulty. Okay, you still have that power fantasy in there, but obviously you're at legendary, so it's going to be very, very difficult. You're going to get one shot, essentially. So that's what I think about that. So guys, before I end this video, I want to start like a little mini kind of series called Let's Talk. Now, will be featuring topics about the Division 2. I've got a couple in mind. I want to do a Let's Talk about gear score, because I think gear score is one of those issues that has been brought up since day one. It's never really been acknowledged by the developers. They've talked about, and I think even on Twitter today, Frederick Thylander talked about how gear score essentially works and why you can't have stat ranges, or why you can't, adjust stat ranges, essentially. Ranges aren't really there with the way the sort of stat allocation works. And I want to talk about that in its kind of its own video, in kind of like a Let's Talk mini-series. There's a couple of other things I want to talk about, like the state of the Dark Zone, among other things. And this video, for one, is kind of one of those where I just want to talk about stuff that's in the game, talk about my opinion on it, my experiences of it, and also get your guys' feedback, because I think we're coming into year 2 almost, in a couple of months, of the Division 2, and I think that's when we're going to start seeing the paid DLC. Now, I have to say, at this moment in time, I'm sure a lot of you guys wouldn't be happy about paid DLC. Me personally, I wouldn't mind it too much if it meant that we got some really good content, some good changes. So at the moment, I kind of wanted to go over some topics that people are talking about, people haven't been addressed before, like gear score, like the way Dark Zone currently is with the meta as it is. Because as you guys know, if you've been into the Dark Zone, and I've been in it a bit more recently than I used to, just to kind of get a feel for it, if you've been in there, you'll probably know all it is pretty much, you got your Hive bleed builds, and you got your one-shot rifle builds, one-shot sniper builds, one-shot seeker builds, and you got your one-shot shotgun builds. It's pretty much a one-shot. It's pretty much the most amount of cheese ever, right? And I've got to admit, at this moment in time, PvP in the Division 2 is just not there. And I don't even know if it's worth saving at this point. And that might be the next video of mine. Is PvP worth saving in Division 2, or should we just go PvE only? Maybe you guys can leave your comments to that down below so that I can formulate a video based on your comments and my own experience for the next video. But this little mini-series is going to be called Let's Talk. It's going to focus on various topics, and I want you guys to get involved. So if you can just leave your comments down below with what you want me to talk about in upcoming videos, and I will absolutely get round to them as much as possible. What I'm hoping to do is make this as much of a daily upload as possible, you know, Monday to Friday, except for Wednesdays because of State of the Game. And I just want to kind of cover as much as I possibly can coming up to year 2, and that way, you know, we've got the developers, if they do watch my videos, which I know some of them do, then they can look at it and go, okay, well, you know, this is what Epic thinks, and he's taking the community feedback and he's pulling it here, and let's see what people have got to say. There you go. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. If you did, please do drop a like on the video. It really, really does help me out, especially with this copper stuff coming up in January. Whilst it shouldn't really affect me, it's going to affect everyone essentially as a viewer. So if you guys really want to support me, drop a like. It does help me out. Thanks very much for watching the video until the end. Until the next one, Epic out.